and other reminders. But before that, I just would like to acknowledge the presence of Sean and Brendan. Thank you for making it here for the safe travel and then joining us straight from your travel. And to also acknowledge, I forgot to say this, to welcome back Beth and Aina, to the region. Um, okay. I hope you had a good Imawas conversation as well. In our sharing, like, a lot of things we're surfacing also, that we have things that we carry along with us, things that are happening in our family, where we come from, and things that had happened, that somehow caused some, kind of heaviness, in our own hearts. So we bring it all together. Members of our family who are sick, and even for our own selves, we join our prayers together, to address and to pray for all, the need for all, for everything that we need to pray for. So the agenda of this regional assembly is really designed to foster both personal connection and communal discernment, as we journey together in mission. We will begin. We have begun by checking with one another as fellow Columbans, taking time to listen and share our experiences, our challenges, our struggles, and also uh, trying to strengthen the bonds of our community as well as Columbans. This assembly will include timely and meaningful inputs also on the current national situation. We will have this urgent call of biodiversity input on that, our commitment to safeguarding, and these reflections will help ground our discussions in the realities that we are facing. So, in central to our gathering is a review and discernment of our regional plan of action as well, in the light of our society's strategic plan, trying to ensure that our local commitment remain aligned with our broader missionary vision. And through a mix of small group dynamics or small group discussions, we have plenary sessions, prayerful engagement. We aim to enter into a conversation in the spirit also. So allowing space for the spirit's movement as we are seeking clarity, unity, and renewed commitment in our shared mission. And during tomorrow and on the third day, Father Dennis Cagantas, who was with us in our regional convention in 2023, will also help us as facilitator in our Emmaus movement of hearts burning and feet moving. So for concerns, this is now about us here on some other announcement concerns in line with the assembly. Please feel free to approach the steering committee, for matters regarding the house. Probably Edward and myself, can be approached about that. And we had posted the list of, this is for meals. There's a sheet of paper posted in the dining area where we are asked to sign out if we are not joining the meal. If you don't sign in there or check that or mark that, so that means we are going to be around here for meals. So that would be the way to gauge, how many people are going to be here. And then there's another sheet in there for other matters. Probably we encourage you, if you have something that you want to raise today, it's only until today, then we will take that off from there. So if you have anything, you can write it there, or you can before lunch now. So that's what the steering committee would like to do. Is there anything else would you like to ask? Oh yeah, we have we have a speaker for the national situation this afternoon, and we have Robert and Mercy, who are members of our safeguarding team, who will be sharing or giving us a bit of an input on safeguarding. So this might be a kind of a follow-up on that, or refresh us with what we had done before, just to update us with it. So, okay, we are privileged to have Dodong with us. No? So maybe this is just to say a little bit about Dodong. He doesn't need much introduction. You know him. You see his face. He he looks pleasant, and will continue to be like that. So Dodong did his sabbatical on studies at the Environmental Science Department in Ateneo de Manila University. And this is under the program of disaster risk and resilience, a broad topic which focuses mainly on the effects of climate change on society and environment. And Dodong is currently continuing this study in hopes to complete it, and sees himself to be working in the ecological ministry of the region, maybe in Malate or in Negros or even in Mindanao. And he had given recollection and workshop on topics such as climate change, disaster resilience and biodiversity, and Christian response and spirituality in the midst of these challenges. So without further ado, we are ready to listen to you. Don't thank you for your generous time and sharing for particularly on this topic of biodiversity. So we give you the floor now, Dodong. Thank you so much.
I could start now, is it?
Okay, Dong Kajot. Just to acknowledge, Anna is joining us. No? Anna Flores from England. So thank you, Anna. Welcome, and thanks for joining us. Okay, Dong, you can go ahead. You may go ahead now. Thank you.
Okay. So the reason why I'm online is not because I am in room 41 hiding. I'm here in Japan. So it's a it's a beautiful country. We were doing a retreat outside Tokyo in the city called Susuno, where you could see the where you could see Mount Fuji. But since we arrived, it's been very cloudy, so I have not seen it yet. So hopefully, before I leave the retreat house, um, we could see it. We have a good day. So anyway, I'm not supposed to be talking biodiversity to you. We invited someone, but he wasn't available, and there was no one else. So uh, I just share something that you know. That might help us. So it's in the middle. I think we will have a bus session. I don't know how much you can say about biodiversity in a little bit more than an hour, but anyway, we'll try. So I'd like to start with the document from the last General Assembly. Um, One of the priorities of that are named in the General Assembly is biodiversity, and the other one is migrant ministry. So let's look at what it says actually. So we will I'll start my sharing from the document. So it says, biodiversity, we surrender our individualism that keeps us separate from the web of life. We humbly commit to caring for our common home through our spirituality, dialogue, advocacy, education, finance, investment, and fundraising. And we commit to living with people, and with the earth that reflects God's true dream of right relationship with all creation. So that's the first paragraph. And the second paragraph is this one. In a spirit of interdependence, we collaborate with other Colombians and the larger church, with indigenous peoples, with people of other faiths and worldviews, and with partners in networks of various types in caring for and loving our Mother Earth that gives life to all. So it says, I put this in bold letters. We adopt the goals and targets of the 2022 Kunming Montreal Global Diversity Framework as a tool for implementation, evaluation, and accountability. And it says we focus on these interconnected concerns, such as essential to biodiversity protection and restoration. So you have extractive industries. I think example of that is mining, food security, economic disparity, climate change, care for the ocean and water. Um, so care for the ocean and water in the sustainable development goals. That's one of the goals, life underwater. So these are big goals. What does it mean? Uh, adopting the goals and targets of uh, this framework. Um, the Kunming it, uh, this convention was supposed to be in Kunming, but that happened during COVID time, so it didn't push through. So and then I think the following year, they had it in Montreal. So that's the word Kunming Montreal Global Diversity Framework. But going back, questions, things like implementation in science, it means something like protecting biodiversity uh, areas. It means also connecting biodiversity areas. So we have the biodiversity corridors. So this in science it mean a lot of things. Evaluation means prioritizing species that are endangered, and accountability is an ethical term that has something to do with reaching the goals and targets of the convention through personal and institutional responsibility, and which the Philippines actually signed the convention, part of the convention. So where did it start? It started in Rio in 1993 during the Earth Summit, and the document that came out from that is United Nations Conventions on Biological Diversity, thus biodiversity, a contraction of the two words. And 1993, it sets three objectives: conservation, on biological diversity, sustainable use of biodiversity, and fair and equitable sharing. So then impact and relevance. They already mentioned climate change, desertification, and economic ecosystem services, indigenous rights. So this is the Bible of biodiversity at the level of UN conventions. So people would always go back to this. But there are, I think, protocols that happened after the Earth Summit in Rio, because it answers then of the prevailing concerns at that time. Like for example, Cartagena Protocol, addresses the use of modern biotechnology, especially in biosafety. And then you have the Nagoya Protocol, access to genetic resources. I remember Sean McDonough wrote that book on patenting of life, and this because that was a real concern at that time. And then eventually the IT biodiversity targets. Uh, it may wherein this protocol uh, addresses specifically biodiversity loss, because then was these countries realize that like was this natural habitats are shrinking. The outcome of all this eventually is the Kunming Montreal framework. So what is the Kunming Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. So it has a mission in that by 2030, we take urgent action to halt and reverse biodiversity loss. And then you could, you know, read the rest of the paragraph. And by 2050, uh, bio, we, the vision is biodiversity is valued, conserved, restored, and wisely used, maintaining ecosystem services, sustaining a healthy planet, and delivering benefits essential for all people. So those terms like ecosystem services, we need to understand those. So just to show you that, if you go back to the document of General Assembly, that is really big, hairy goals because, adopting Kunming Montreal Global Diversity Framework, this convention has 23 targets and 4 goals. So if you start there on the conservation, it says biodiversity, uh, near zero losses. Uh, restore 30% of degraded nature. Effectively conserve 30% of lands and areas. And halt human-induced extinctions. So that is a conservation too. So if you adopt this, that is a tall order. And then you have this, avoid, that means stop, uh, unsustainable use, harvest, trade, and you could Google these things. But it focuses on the 4 goals and these 23 targets. The kind of yellow there, that's sustainable use, manage and use of, you know, uh, wild species and all those things that you see. So you could go back to the document and then it's basically this thing that you are looking at. And action, that means policies, financing, and all those things. So we move on. Again, this is the 4 goals of the Kunming Montreal Global Diversity Framework, and like protect and restore, prosper with nature, share benefits fairly, invest and collaborate. So I was just thinking, what was what was in the mind of the General Assembly when they said that they are going to adopt the Conning Montreal Global Diversity Framework? Are they all, trying to do the 23 targets and 4 goals? Or just those things that they enumerated on the second paragraph? So maybe to kind of maybe hone our kind of commitment, we must understand what the biodiversity is. What, where, when, and why. And so if you study biodiversity in itself, it's a you could do an MA degree on this one. So we'll just squeeze it into uh, less than an hour. Uh, this slide, you don't have to read everything, but it simply says that life in the planet took a long time to emerge. The first 2 billion years, these are really just microbes. And then, by the time we reach 2.5 billion years, cyanobacteria emerged, and these are the first photosynthetic bacteria. And that means they trap light uh, and that for energy and release oxygen. So those the on the right side there, but you have kind of magnification of what a bacteria is, archaea, and then the microbial mats. These are actually fossils of the first cyanobacteria. They are still, you could still see them, I think, in Australia in the form of these stromatolites. So, but the thing is, it was this. It took about 2 billion years for the first photosynthetic bacteria to emerge, and then it took another about 2 billion years or less, almost more than 1 billion years, definitely, to come up with uh, what we call cells that have nucleus. The bacteria and archaea do not have nucleus. We call it prokaryotes. But the was this after another billion years we have what we call eukaryotes, and these are was these organisms that have nucleus, whose cells have nucleus in them, which actually was this. A big leap because it then transformed into multicellular organisms um, in the ocean floor um, uh, about 800 million years ago. And then life on land started about 7 million years ago, and everything started from there. There was this flourishing of life that we now know. And this is just a sharing on what's this. It was, before when I was in college, and then in studying theology, we talk about primordial soup, which might be the first, like life form on Earth. And Miller and Urey made an experiment that if you put uh, uh, oxygen, uh, was this ammonia, nitrate, hydrogen, and water, and you put electrical spark, uh, in that experiment, then you have you could produce actually amino acids and other organic compounds. So life really, in other words, started here on Earth. But where? So maybe the most likely place is probably in the hydrothermal vents. It's because of the complexity of was this the use of energy at the cellular level. This is the field work that I joined, and we went to Masungi, where they have kind of a place for people doing research. What we're doing is we're collecting what's this, what we call invertebrates, the small ones. It just kind of this was this disturb, the substrate, and then you scoop it, and then with the netting, and then you could see those little microorganisms called invertebrates. So life started very small. I think the takeaway is it takes a long time, long process for life to emerge and also reach the complexity that we are seeing at present. In terms of this is another rendition of how life emerged since uh, organisms start to colonize the land. Uh, so on the left side there, on the right side there, there's this continents. Every 280 years, continents would come and break apart like that. That's why you have this along with the kind of life that emerges. So, but that's just another was this rendition, iteration of the appearance of the major forms of life on Earth. And the reason for continental drift is you know like this on the right, on the left, which you probably are very familiar of. So this is what we have at the moment. Uh, it, life in the planet that you have, the biosphere with the whole, I suppose, Earth, and then you have the ecosystems, and then within that ecosystems are different species that we call communities. And then the communities are composed of species, of course, and so one species would have a number of populations, and then of course, yeah, the last one is organism. So that's very much the picture of the biosphere and individual was this ecosystems. So that's our blue planet. And as much as we'd like to know that there are other planets out there, we have not come in contact with one. So at the moment, we just have to live with the fact that there is only one planet, and we only know of one life, uh, one planet that has life, that we know in the universe. So we go into, what is biodiversity? Why is our planet so biodiverse, and what do we mean when we say biodiverse? So these are the scientists would say that there are at least five facets of biodiversity, and the variety of all life on Earth. Um, you have species diversity that we all know, and that like uh, life is composed of different species. And then you have, but within that species diversity, you have genetic diversity, and you have evolutionary diversity on actually that every species is part of the tree of life in the planet. And then you have functions. Every species has a function in the ecosystem. And then you have obviously ecosystem diversity that there is not only one ecosystem, there are many ecosystems. You have forest, you have riparian, and those are the life that grow beside the river. You have wetlands, mangroves, coral reef. Those are the different ecosystems. And thus we term them ecosystem biodiversity. So we move on and looking at each one. Species diversity, as you know, um, the I suppose the widely used unit of biodiversity is species. Um, so you have the picture, different pictures there. Those are examples of species, and they are the jade vine found in Masungi. That's endemic in the Philippines. And also you have the Philippine deer, native to the Philippines. Another species, just an example. And you have dugong, sea cow. They're found in other places, but they are also found in Philippine waters. They're actually mammals, thus we call them sea cows. And they feed on seagrass. So more seagrass, more sea cows, or dugong. Species diversity, you have in high school biology, you learn speciation. So that's the picture is of the, this is a picture of the lake. It used to be part of lake to the sea. So the water there is what's this? Was salty before, and then that lake was isolated from the sea. Through time, it became fresh water, and there are animals there that adapt to that fresh water. And this is Toides. That's a Sardinella species. It used to be, uh, live on the sea, but now it live on the fresh water because it adapted to its environment. And also, thus it thrives in the lake, um, became a different species from a species that it was part of when this organism was living in the sea. So that is what we call speciation. So what, I mean, the number of species, we don't know. The estimate is there are 3.5 billion species scientifically described, but scientists said that there might be repetition on, like the species being described. So the recorded number is probably about 1.8 million valid species on record. But there are a lot of species that we have not named yet. So if you are lucky, you can discover a species and name it after yourself. But anyway, but my biologists would estimate that there are 8.7 million species that live on land and in the seas. Um, this number will change and will most probably increase. The estimate does not include or exclude significant portion of bacteria and archaea. So that's an example of bacteria there. So if you include them, these bacteria and archaea, um, in the tree of life, um, the number of species in the planet would multiply many, many times, and it's probably about a trillion. That means, as a comparison, the Milky Way is estimated to contain about 104 billion stars. Um, and well, the universe maybe a trillion or 2 trillion. So this would say, oh, like life in the planet is actually a hidden universe, is as many as the stars in the sky or in the universe. We move on the geography of life. Where do we find uh, the most diverse places on Earth? And that is within the tropical zone. Not all species are everywhere. They have specific tolerances in relation to the environment. The second one is, in the tropics, you have a combination of, warm weather and high precipitation. So you will find a lot of this species there. They said that most species are rare, of course, and rare is actually common in terms of species. So, yeah. So within species, there is also about genetic diversity. Uh, well, genetic diversity simply means that like individuals in the same species share common genes and DNA. So you in the room share 99.9% of genes. What makes us different is that tiny 0.1% that makes us different. That means it makes us we're different because of different adaptations in different environment. That makes me different in terms of hair color, although I dyed my hair. Or color of your eyes, shape of your nose, etc. And it's the same with other species also. The example is rice, Oryza sativa. There's about 100,000 varieties of rice, and this is important in terms of conservation because there are rice varieties of rice that might have adapted to much warmer climate or maybe to salty water. So these are stored. The seeds are stored in the Institute of International Rice Research Institute. Now, the problem is if you store actually seeds, you dry them and you put them in the fridge, you refrigerate to preserve them. But the problem is, how was this? Maybe your structure where you stored your what's this different varieties of rice might be vulnerable to earthquake. You know, so you need a backup. So where do you put the backup? It's So coffee, your beloved coffee, you have different varieties of coffee. Some of them are, like grow in what's this in much cooler climate like Arabica or Robusta in the lowlands. This is it's a warmer climate, and they said that there are 130 species and many varieties, and many of them are resistant to drought. They're not particularly good. I was this, uh, very productive or have a lot of seeds, but in terms of maybe using a particular gene for a particular and introducing them to another variety, this different type of species of coffee might be very important if there is a change of temperature. So that's genetic diversity. So we keep on moving forward, and that is evolutionary diversity. It is important because some organisms have long evolutionary diversity, others are more recent ones, and they vary in terms of functions. And of course, evolution, you all know what evolution is. Descent with modification, and that's just an illustration. We all live in water once upon a time, and one of the fish crawled into land, and the Tiktaalik, they call it Tiktaalik, and that is our common ancestor, 375,000 years ago, a million years ago. We share common ancestor uh, with all animal on land with this Tiktaalik fish. I was only a fish. Okay, moving on. And of course, evolution happens by natural selection. There's mutation, there's unfavorable mutations, and then reproduction, and all those things that you learn in school. This is the tree of life, the three domains: bacteria, archaea, eukarya. That means, the prokaryotes, they are organisms that don't have nucleus. Eukaryotes, they are organisms that have nucleus. And this is like kind of the first branching of life. And we were all once, a tiny, tiny, tiny cell. For example, the all plants, their common ancestor is pretty much the green algae, and now you have all these phyla, you know, um, different plants, liverworts, mosses, hornworts. Then you have uh, lycopides, ferns, and then you have gymnosperms, the seed-bearing plant, and angiosperms. Angiosperms are flowering plants. 95% of the plants are flowering plants. Gymnosperm is only about 5%. So then you realize the importance of what's this pollinators in terms of species conservation and all that, or healthy functioning of the ecosystem. And this is like the tree of life in animals. You have the different phyla there, and where is the uh, you could you have the common ancestor once upon 775 70 million years ago. And then where we are in this is that we are chordata actually, because we have skeleton bones. So that's just, another rendition of the tree of life. A closer look on who we are as human beings. Yeah. We have, again, common, this is just to explain what common ancestor is. So you have, common ancestor with the fish. And that common ancestor was this, we have, with the animals on land. and then we are closer to chimps. We share a lot more in common in terms of genetic diversity, in terms of like sharing of the same genes, and then these are our distant cousins. I think there's a type of mouse that share about 60% of our genes. That's why we experiment on mouse with different drugs because they're closer to us also. So these are an example again, but this is the reptiles, birds. We'll just skip this one, I think. And then thus, if you go back your genes, you share a lot with the fish. So you have your inner fish. Some people actually in the picture there, uh, they could see that uh, that's the part of the scale or something. So you have an inner fish with you. You also have an inner reptile. We share common ancestors with mammals from this particular part reptile and part mammal called Tritylodont. And then in terms of primates, we have a common ancestor 50 million years ago, this little guy there called Notarchus. So this is actually was this a book, Your Inner Fish, but it talks about like it's actually three chapters or three made into documentary called Your Inner Fish, Your Inner Reptile, and Your Inner Monkey. In terms of our commonality of all this is that the structure of our brain, if you look at the fish, it says that the same structure. We have a forebrain, a midbrain, and a hindbrain, and this emerged. The fish that emerged uh, was, Amphioxus. We have brain, and that's about 500 million years ago. So that's just the concept of evolutionary diversity. So when you talk about biodiversity, you don't only talk about species. You don't only talk about genetics. Uh, you also talk about evolutionary diversity. And then functional diversity, that every species has a function in the ecosystem. You have an area there. That means they're leguminosa. Uh, More relate in same family with legumes because their roots have symbiotic relationship with the nitrogen fixing bacteria like the legumes, and the pods are actually similar. You have your Philippine honeybee related to Jollibee, except that Jollibee does not pollinate. The Philippine honeybee pollinates. They're pollinators. They're very important to growing crops. And you have this nice little guy, with this forest dragon reptile, endemic in the Philippines, mostly found in Mindanao. So all of them have functions. Herbs or reptiles and amphibians, they eat insects, so they kind of control what's this, the, uh, the proliferation of insects. You have birds as seed dispersers. Um, so that's a kalau. There in principle of biodiversity, there is what we call redundancy. That some species have do the same functions. So if one species kind of get extinct, then there are kind of an extra layer of insurance that a healthy ecosystem will still thrive, but it has its limits. It's important to know these things because it helps us to value and prioritize natural habitats for biodiversity protection. These are metallophytes that UPLB discovered. What they do is they are plants that love metals. So they are kind of, what's this? They act as filtration. in terms of pollution. And people are, discovering more species of lichens, for example. Lichens are very important in terms of health. They're indicators of a healthy environment, the presence of lichens. It's what's this? It's a symbiotic relationship between an algae and fungi that forms these lichens. But they can also as they store carbon. So they're important in the ecosystems, no matter how small. But there are so many of them. In the parts of the trees, you could find them if the environment is healthy. So ecosystem diversity, you have, uh, I think I explained this already, different ecosystems, coral reef, rivers, what's this, upland forests, different types of forests, what's this, beech forests, and all that. There's about 12 in the Philippines, different types of forests. And then so the picture there, what's this, is an example of a degraded and what's this, a healthy ecosystem. Because we look at ecosystems, especially in the Philippines, a healthy ecosystem from ridge to reef, so along the line, when there is a degradation of a particular ecosystem, it would have a cascading effects on the ecosystems below. Ecosystems like species, they are transient due to global climate changes. Human disturbance also can play a role. So an ecosystem can also disappear. In terms of ecosystem services, these are what's this? These are services that we take totally free. It can be direct and indirect. It could be a middleman and sell them the ecosystem services. But we derive services from ecosystem through it's just a natural process. As you have supporting services, you have biodiversity, your natural habitat, your photosynthesis, soil formation, those are supporting. Provisioning, of course, like clean water, fish, wood, pollination, and then regulating like cold temperatures, flood control. The whole hydrological cycle that we have, purifying water, storing carbon, clean air, so those are regulating services. Cultural, mountains are sacred. It's also you could do research also in the forest, in the lakes, and all that. So those are what we call cultural services. Tourism at the moment is very popular. So those are cultural services that we derive from the ecosystem. So sometimes we don't know how much we're getting from a healthy environment. So just a review, I think this is the time when we have a boss, Leo said. So talk about yourself there for maybe 5 minutes and see, uh, you know, what you have heard and share what you have heard and what you think. Thank you. We'll come back in 5 minutes. Yeah. You let me know the when you are settled and okay now to come back.
Okay. So thank you for the Dodong for taking us back a few years, no? Review review of our biology. I honestly do not remember a thing from my biology classes. Anyway, so please turn to your seatmate or seatmates if you prefer to have a buzz, 3 people or two, for about 5 minutes and talk amongst yourselves. Um, Highlights probably or something that caught your attention. And then afterwards, we'll open the floor for questions. Okay, so the time is.
And there's a second part.
Okay.
No questions yet.
Yes. Okay, so 20, yeah, 25? Ah, yeah, 3 minutes na lang daw. Okay. Okay, 30 seconds left to wrap up your conversation.
Yeah, 30 seconds. Maybe this, so I just focus on the interconnectedness. Yeah, it's like this we human being usually we just meant think about it's like human centered. Yeah, but it's not anymore. It's like we have to think about it. You cannot be in the center. You have to because in the whole the history of
Okay,
the earth, it's a
can
it's
we
only one
turn our
spot
chairs
of the presence
and
here. So we
give
have to
our
respect
attention back to our
history of
resource speaker?
or viruses or bacteria, like that. Yeah. So
Uh,
we need to be
Thank you. Can you hear me? Yeah. So I hope you, I hope you learned something. Uh, okay. We just continue on. This is not as long as the first one, but maybe we ask the question: why does it matter? You know, why biodiversity matters? Well, first of all, for us, yeah, like we pretty much get our medicines from the forest or from from the environment around us or from the sea. This little, very humble Madagascar periwinkle, uh, the compounds that is extracted from the flower is the source of vincristine and vinblastine, that's used for chemotherapy of people who have leukemia. Penicillin, again, antibiotic, very important. Horseshoe crabs, um, um, they're used, so like the vaccines are free from harmful bacteria. Of course, it matters, biodiversity matters because food, we need food. Wild bees and other insects pollinate our crops for free. And without them, a lot of our crops, there are, self-pollinating crops, but most of them would need pollination from bees and insects and birds. Food crops that has longer evolutionary history has more nutritional value, so don't like this undermine your broccoli. It's more nutritious than your rice. So it matters for us, but it also matters for nature. Every species is part of nature's intricate web of life. Their existence is crucial to the health and functioning of ecosystems. So, as they drive key natural processes such as feeding, reproduction, dispersal, competition, survival, and mortality. So, like species, if they are there, they help maintain a healthy environment, a healthy ecosystem, all beneficial to all living organisms in that ecosystem. So we have what we call keystone species. Maybe it's an important example, it's an important concept in which a keystone species would have a very strong relationship with other species that when it disappears, then there is an impact in the ecosystem if a keystone species disappear. Uh, Termites. You probably don't think of termites as keystone species. We tend to was this kill them off when we find them. But they are keystone species because they are detritivores. They kind of eat like the wood, that's the dead wood, and the decomposing organic matter. So they play a very important role in nutrient cycling and decomposition. So other also microorganisms that live in the soil would have could benefit. So when you find termites, um, I, anyway, and others. This is an example of a keystone species. So your little squirrel there, your ground squirrel. This is I think in the US an example. So squirrel is they they eat seeds and they're very good seed dispersers. But they are also food for killfox and shrikes and eagle. So if squirrels are to disappear, then there's going to be a severe decline in many tree species that the squirrels help disperse the seed. So potentially causing widespread extinction. It would also disrupt the food web because other predators like foxes, owls, and weasels prey on squirrels. And if you take squirrels from the ecosystem, they would face a food shortage. So that's just an example of a keystone species of the strength of the interaction. that it has with other species in terms of food web. And that arrows there that's all over the place, that's how complex food web is in an ecosystem. This giant disaster, they are about, I think, what, how many feet? About 72 meters, centimeters. So that's about 3 feet. So they feed on on shells. So they kind of you know uh, go on top of the mussels and then eat uh, what's inside. Uh, so if you kill them off, if you take it from the ecosystem, then in places where they used to thrive, uh, species diversity would go down because then the more dominant, mussels, they would multiply and they don't have a prey anymore. So the competition then with others, they would win the mussels. So that's just an example of keystone species and the strength of interaction in terms of food web. This is an important concept to learn because we have a concept of ecological transition, um, and that's just an illustration there. Primary succession, which means you have a bare rock and it's colonized by lichens and mosses, and then the grass and herbs would grow, and shrubs and bushes and young trees and pines, and then you have mature trees and oaks, and you have a climax community. The secondary succession is when there is disturbance like fire, forest fire, or human activity, and then it goes again, and it's intermediate was this succession or secondary succession. Then you have this lichens and mosses and ferns and all that shrubs, young trees, mature oaks. After that disturbance, and you have again, uh, uh, was this a climax community. Climax community are not necessarily good because there are few species that tend to dominate. So disturbance is actually uh, a good check and balance within an ecosystem. But how much disturbance do you need? So any any relatively discrete event in time uh, that disrupts the ecosystem, that's disturbance. Um, the important thing here is frequency and intensity. If you talk about disturbance and letting other species like forest fires, and then after the forest fires, a lot more species would a lot more different organisms would grow. But maybe the thing to was this to consider is the frequency of disturbance and intensity. So if it's frequent and very intense, it's probably not good. So there is a concept called, a theory called intermediate disturbance hypothesis. There is high disturbance, there is low disturbance, um, but it seems that occasional disturbance or intermediate disturbance is good for ecosystem. But again, sometimes this concept can be weaponized by different interest groups. But the thing here is that the frequency and high intensity of disturbance. Why it matters again for itself, and this is, I think, similar to integrity of creation, that every species is unique and loved by God, created by God. That's a value. So Homo sapiens, we are also species. But we are but one among many other species of the great apes and monkeys. A single leaf of the branch of the tree of life. So we share a common ancestor that lived about 15 million years ago. And so that's why it matters. The importance for us, for nature, uh, healthy species, healthy maintain their presence, maintain a healthy ecosystem, a healthy environment, and for itself, that species is actually in its own right was this important. That's why I think there are talks about rights of nature. Uh, um, at the moment, we have protection of what's this legal protection through presidential decree or Republic Act. That's good. But in terms of species have rights, I think people are still talking about it. Threats to biodiversity. At the moment, it's habitat loss, and that's the number of species affected. Uh, and then exploitation, climate change, and other threats. So those are, I mean, habitat loss at the moment is the number one. We are over exploiting also, uh, uh, mm, uh, a lot of species. And climate change has become a much bigger, what's this, threat to biodiversity and would be the number one in the future. So saving biodiversity, there are large-scale solutions like the Kunming-Montreal biodiversity framework that governments signed to. So in terms of large-scale solutions, then you have ecosystem conservation. So these are protected areas through a presidential decree. There are proclaimed protected areas, but they don't have legal protection yet because there is no presidential decree or Republic Act. Malindang has actually was this is a national park through a Republic Act, and people are not supposed to be there. But anyway, that's a long story. So we have this species conservation and genetic conservation. If and these are all very measurable. Was this scientists say that if a species in particular area would be less than maybe 5%. I'm not sure. I can't remember the number. Then that calls for an alarm, and we need to conserve that particular species. It's actually a good reason to, if we have endangered species in a particular area, to proclaim that area as a protected area. So that's large-scale solutions. Do we really have to go there, as institutions, because this needs a lot of resources. I mean, corporations and governments uh, could not even kind of finance the whole thing. What can we do individually? Probably it depends on our personal sphere of influence, like eat less meat, eat more fruits and vegetables, expand your diet, clothing. I'm not making this up. I got this from, another source. Use of clean energy, gardening, especially organic gardening. Vegetables or flowers, like they help the bees, transportation, and so many other things that you can do. You influence people around you, ask critical questions, vote wisely, be curious. All can help. Support groups that work on conservation, etc. So those are just thoughts. So this one is just a quote. Kind of borrowed quite a bit from this book, The Hidden Universe by Alexander Antonelli. So he said, how much is a flower worth? It really depends on who's answering. In our excessively monetized societies, the economists may attempt more or less objectively to put a price tag on it. Flowers of timber trees, especially for their reproduction and therefore their very existence in the forest, may have a value that is the price of the timber itself. For smallholder, the value will only be high if the flower belongs to a crop that survives this year's drought. For a bee that pollinates a single species of plant and whose tongue cannot reach the nectarines of any other, finding the right flower to satiate its hunger will be a question of life and death. For a poet or the nature lover, the value is at least as high as the long hike in the forest in search of rare blossoms that enchant our lives and fill us with awe. Values are relative, fluid, critical yet diffuse, and a star's care little about what we think about them when we gaze into the void. Flowers and biodiversity are not really here for us. But one thing is certain, we cannot be here without them. I just like that paragraph from this book. So I wanted to share it with you. I think that's about it. There are a lot more that we can talk about. Like everything biodiversity, strategic action plan, and everything. And then we go into a more granular level, like what does conservation mean? Of ecosystem conservation, genetic conservation, species conservation. These are very good topics that you can explore, and maybe you can invite someone to uh, help us understand these things, these concepts. But anyway, that's about it for me at the moment. Questions to ponder as a society, how do you respond to the call of the General Assembly on the priority of biodiversity? What are the practical ways you can implement these development priorities in the region? And as individuals, in what practical ways you can save and promote biodiversity? So those are just thoughts. That's a very I think, crude questions, but maybe that's a good start for us to reflect on biodiversity and threats, and maybe attempt to what's this to to save what is there, what is left of it, especially in the Philippines. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Dodong. So he left us with questions to ponder. I think we can take that away with us. For now, we would open the floor for questions for our resource speaker, Father Sean.
One question I have is an observation more that in trying to reestablish nature and all that, sometimes we're making mistakes. And then one mistake was this, where Dr. Jung says people should not be planting trees there along the sea because that's where the seagrass grows. So I would have encouraged people plant these trees and all that. But I wasn't aware that by planting trees where there are seagrasses, that's not the right environment. So there's probably more mistakes that we make like that. And instead of kind of enriching the environment, I'm diminishing it. So another one is supergrass that grows all over the bukit, and it has killed hagonai and different things like that. So there are some things like that that at least our knowledge helps, that we're not kind of doing something that's diminishing the environment.
Thank you for the Sean. I think
Thanks, Sean.
I share the same insight as well. Yes, Dodong.
Oh yeah, absolutely. That's a very good insight. Like for example, before we never really thought of like biodiversity in terms of tree planting. So we kind of planted a lot of mahogany, and it seems that they are invasive species and they kind of dominate the environment where they grow. So you kind of need a reset because these are invasive species. Uh, they don't promote biodiversity. It does more harm in the environment than we thought. Yeah, that's an example.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Rex.
Salamat Dong. Salamat sa first sharing. No? I just want to share one day I went to the Dansulihon, the Igaonon indigenous people, and I shared to them my uh, interest now I got from Paul Glenn planting balete tree. So natakdan ko. No? So I told them, it's good to plant balete tree. And they replied to me, Father, ang mga langgam man nagatanong og balete. The birds are the one planting them. So this is the younger sibling talking to the elder sibling. So I like the language we use, like cousins. We have cousins of other species. No? But today I have this insight also in the morning. I want to share. I shared to our group um, that even though we are few in numbers, personnel, it's okay with me. Before I'm annoyed when the in our document we say we are a small group. Why write a small group? We can grow. But now anyway, I believe God also wants us to be a small group. But today the insight I gather is once our eyes are open, we are actually a member of community of communities. The birds, if we want reforestation, they are our co-members. They plant with us. We plant with them together. And just a small story in Batang, Bruno, the dog, planted two coconut trees there. That's a story I enjoyed. Thank you.
Thank you, Rex. Yes, indeed, life started small, and even though we're small, we can still make a big impact. Anybody else would like to raise a question? Hi, John.
Dong, thank you for the presentation. Just on the last part on in terms of response, there is a big scale and the individual. I thought there was something missing there. What about groups? And we're looking at the indigenous people. A very small group, but they care 80% of the remaining biodiversity in the planet. So sometimes it can be leading when either you do a big scale and you can make difference, or you just do an individual. But I think there's an in between that needs to be recognized there, like the role of the indigenous people. The other one that also is, what's the role of faith in all of this? Because I think that might help us in exploring why the General Council pushed for the Kunming, like using the Kunming biodiversity as criteria for the society. So I think it's because even in the United Nations, there, I think during the last COP, they have now recognized the role of faith in the meetings. Before, they were just outsiders, but in the meetings, big meetings now, there is now a provided space. So there's a recognition of the role of the faith-based groups in this work.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I agree. Yeah. So the role of what's this indigenous peoples, I think it's very important to to see indigenous peoples as guardians of ecosystem because they have lived there, they have looked after their place, you know, and the displacement is was this. I think um, very sad. But there is what we call there is you know in I don't want to talk about this, but there is what we call ecological exploitation. You know, ecological exploitation meaning uh, you don't actually uh, exploit directly people in terms of labor. You just ruin their environment. And then that is a form of, I mean, there is no direct exploitation, right? But you just ruin the environment that you thrive on and that we have looked after for a long time and have developed a good relationship with that ecosystem. You just take it and then you ruin it, and what is left is was this people who have lost livelihood and all those things. At the moment, it's very sad that this is what how capitalist system works.
Ah, Brendan.
Comment. The Catholic Church recently had 7 canonizations. I would like to see an 8th of the indigenous peoples because I don't think the indigenous peoples are any different from any other people. They operate in the same world under the exact same economic, socio, political, and cultural pressures that the rest of us all operate under. And I know of one indigenous person who would say to me, Father, we are not without sin, that they themselves would admit that they have been part of the problem in destroying their own environment out of desperation to feed their families and put their children through school. The exact same pressures that every other Filipino family is facing. Having said that, however, we are not without hope because there are a few individual indigenous people. Recently was listening on the BBC World Service about a young Peruvian indigenous person somewhere in the tropical part of Peru in the Amazon basin, who is campaigning very, very strongly for the protection of her environment in that area. So what I'm saying is, I'm not being dismissive of the point that has been made earlier, but all I'm trying to say is that they are no different from us. They are people facing the same problems. The majority of the indigenous peoples are just too busy surviving. But there are one or two exceptional individuals who are literally putting their lives on the line in the defense of the environment and of their fellow indigenous.
Thank you, Brendan. Dodong, would you like to respond or
Yeah,
add?
I agree. Like again, yeah, like disturbance. I mean, if um, the intensity and the scale and all that, and also indigenous peoples used to live in vast tracts of land, in forest that they have a in this particular place, and then they would leave that, and again it becomes actually there's more growth afterwards, because the ecosystem can contain it. Um, so like, but the shrinking of the habitat would make, and the size and maybe the scale of it would now make that kind of not suitable practice. Um, so I don't know, but yeah, I agree with Brenda. Absolutely.
Okay. One more?
I'm encouraged by hearing that if faith is introduced has been an important step, and I would have found that the people who say in that prayer, they do tend to do more for the environment. And it would be wrong to assume that because people come to our churches, that their faith is going to help them save the environment. The exact opposite could be true, because Vinnie Bush often talks about the good logger, who looks after his family, but he destroys, hundreds of acres of environment. So for me, that's very encouragement, but it also opens the door to assess how is our faith helping us to live in the environment creatively.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks, Sean.
Finn?
Just staying with John's question about faith in the whole picture and why General Council might have zero, well, the last General Assembly really, and General Council zeroed in on this area. I'm not entirely sure, but I think it's a wonderful question. But I'm reminded of a book that came out a number of years ago by Dermot O'Murrochú called Ancestral Grace. And it was looking at the biblical account of creation which was written in its own worldview, obviously, in the big picture that you're describing, Dodong, you know, and that is the biblical story, as it were, you know, and we're discovering more about the universe in which we live, and that, you know, the expansiveness, the enormity of everything, and the complexity and all the details, and that has to reflect everything about God in a way, you know, that our kind of ways of understanding the creation story are being stretched beyond comprehension, and and we need to be stretched in that way, you know, to understand whatever the mind and heart of God and the creative energies of God is in all of this. So it's I mean, faith has to be woven into all of this, and you know, it really stretches our understanding and imagination about the creative God, you know.
Yeah, thank you, Shin. The, I think Elizabeth Johnson said that, you know, there is creation, the whole idea of creation is a different concept from the idea of uh, natural world. Creation is a theological concept uh, that says that, you know, that everything is created by God, and there is this dynamic relationship between the creator and creation, and that dynamic relationship continues uh, to evolve, and and it's the spirit of God that animates, you know, the whole creation. So it's a beautiful theology, and there and that is not only that's not only in contemporary theology, that has been there. This whole regard for creation as reflective of, you know, the grandeur, the beauty, the goodness of God is there since the very beginning, like Augustine and Gregory of Nyssa and Gregory the Great, Bernard of Clairvaux, Saint Francis. So just have to dig into the tradition, I think, and says, look, this is what faith says, you know, in terms of like the beauty of creation that makes us appreciate the world we live in. Yes, and it's a different kind of, but the natural world is a natural, natural world is, um, it can it can exist independently also. I mean, you don't want science to say, look, you know, we don't discover this, and you put God, the God of the gods. And that's probably not the way, but you know, like how do you take on this dynamic process of evolution and see it from the perspective of faith is a challenge for everyone, of men and women of faith, and you have to formulate your own, uh, you know, articulate your own faith in terms of looking at the natural world.
Yeah.
But you have to understand it. The more you understand, I think the greater the appreciation.
Yeah, and yeah, just in line with that, something, you know, hearing what you have shared, Dudong, it really, you know, brings us or into, you know, looking at this wondrous variety of life in all forms as an expression, you know, of God's creative love, actually, you know, and I think, you know, as I was looking into that, you know, like why we are choosing it, you know, why we are prioritizing this as a mission also for us at this time, that we look biodiversity not just as a kind of environmental concern, but it is indeed a kind of a missionary imperative as well. You know, like kind of it is a spiritual, you know, imperative by saying that this is something that we have to do, you know, because of our faith, of our missionary calling. You know, because you know we know that creation is really, you know, a revelation of God's love also. So I think that's
Right, thanks, Leo.
Okay. If there are no more questions, we will formally close. Formally close. Anyway, I'll just to kind of wrap things up for this input. Thank you, Dodong, for that intense presentation. I'd like to review that later on. Anyway, just to connect with what he showed us with his last slide, how much is a flower worth? If you're going to ask that to a politician who is more into build, 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 most probably he will answer you, um, tourism income is more, well, is more worthy than that flower. However, unfortunately for them, we still have groups like us who still believe and understands that we cannot survive without them, even the smallest or the little things in our surroundings. So with that, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, and we would break for lunch. We come back at 2 o'clock.
Yeah, thank you. I hope it's useful.
Anna, thank you very much for staying up with us. What time is it in Britain at the moment? Night, no? Or morning? Early morning. Wow.
Thank you. Bye.
Hello, Anna.
Bye, Dodong. Thank you.
Okay, let's break for lunch.
Bye-bye.
Okay, enjoy your lunch.
Enjoy. Bye-bye.